My name is Helen Monroe, and for most of my 62 years, I have lived my life like a well-tended garden, quietly, with patience, and with a deep-seated belief that if you nurture things with love, they will flourish. I was born in this house, a sprawling clapboard home named The Willows by my great-grandmother, set on a few green acres just outside of Cypress Creek. Its scent is my own, a blend of lemon oil, old books, and the damp, loamy perfume of the potting soil I keep on the sun porch. For 42 of those years, I shared this life with my husband, Arthur. He was an architect, a man who built gleaming, modern structures of glass and steel that scraped the sky. I, in contrast, cultivated things that grew from the earth, heirloom roses, rambling wisteria, and a family. Our son, Leo, was my proudest creation, a gentle, thoughtful man with his father's height and my love for history. He was an art professor at the local university, a man who found beauty in the past. The equilibrium of my world had felt off balance for months. Arthur had become a stranger in his own home, his presence a ghost haunting the edges of my life. He'd retreat to his study, the door a silent barrier, or work late at his firm, Monroe Architecture, with an excuse always ready on his lips. The easy affection we had once shared had withered, leaving a brittle silence in its place. Leo, too, had become distant, consumed by his new marriage to Chloe, a woman so bright and polished she seemed to reflect the world rather than absorb it. My life, once a vibrant tapestry, felt as though its threads were being quietly, inexplicably, pulled loose. The call that unraveled everything came on a Tuesday in early May. It was from Isabel, Chloe's older sister. Her voice, usually so calm and measured, was stretched thin with an anxiety that vibrated through the phone. "Helen? Could I possibly come and talk to you? Alone?" Something in her tone, a quiet desperation, sent a chill through me despite the warmth of the spring morning. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice betraying none of my sudden unease. "The kettle is always on." I spent the next hour preparing, a ritual of normalcy to ward off the encroaching dread. I arranged a plate of my lemon and rosemary shortbread on a porcelain dish painted with violets, my grandmother's favorite. I set out 2 cups and saucers, the ones with the delicate gold rims, on the small table in the sunroom, which overlooked the budding hydrangeas. From there, one could see the weeping willows that gave the house its name, their branches swaying like green lace in the breeze. This house, this garden, they were my sanctuary. When Isabel arrived, she looked as if she'd carried a great weight all the way to my door. She was a social worker, a woman accustomed to the world's sorrows, but the strain on her face was personal. Her eyes, a soft, compassionate brown, were shadowed with sleeplessness. "Thank you for seeing me, Helen," she murmured, her hands twisting the strap of her leather satchel. "Nonsense. Come in, Isabel. I've made your favorite shortbread." I led her to the sunroom, but she didn't touch the food. She sat on the edge of the wicker armchair, her back ramrod straight, and stared into the garden as if searching for a strength she couldn't find within herself. "Isabel, what is it?" I asked gently, pouring tea into her cup. The simple, domestic sound seemed to break the dam of her composure. "I don't know how to say this," she began, her voice trembling. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "I feel like I'm about to set a fire to everything, but I can't. I can't live with the silence anymore." My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs, but my hands remained steady as I passed her the teacup. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." She finally met my gaze, and in the depths of her eyes, I saw a sorrow so profound it stole my breath. "It's about Chloe. And Arthur." The world didn't stop. The birds still sang outside the window, and the scent of jasmine still hung in the air. But inside me, a fine, hairline crack appeared, starting in my heart and spreading through my entire being. I kept my expression placid, my hands folded in my lap. "What about them?" "They're having an affair." The words were a quiet, devastating blow. "I saw them, Helen. A few weeks ago. At a little bistro downtown, near Arthur's office. I thought it was a work lunch until I saw him take her hand. They looked like a couple. I confronted Chloe about it. I begged her to think about what she was doing, to think of you, of Leo. And what did she say? I whispered, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Isabel's face hardened with a pain that was not her own. She laughed. She told me to mind my own business. She said you were old news, a relic in your own home. She said Arthur deserved someone vibrant, and that once the divorce was final, she and Arthur would make sure you were taken care of, but didn't get in the way. She said, oh Helen, she said she only married Leo to get close to the family. To the money. To Arthur. The sunroom, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage. The beautiful, orderly world I had so carefully cultivated was a sham, its roots rotted with deceit. 42 years of marriage, a son I adored, a daughter-in-law I had welcomed with an open heart, all of it was a lie, a carefully constructed stage for a play of greed and betrayal. Why are you telling me this, Isabel? My voice was a ghost of its former self. She reached across the table, her warm hand covering my cool, wrinkled one. Because it's wrong, she said, her voice fierce with conviction. Because you have been kinder to me and my family than we ever deserved. Because Leo is a good man who is being used in the most cruel way imaginable. And because I can't stand by and watch my sister detonate this family for her own selfish ambition. I looked at our joined hands. Hers, young and strong. Mine, marked by decades of gardening, of kneading dough, of holding my husband and my son. Does Leo know? No, she whispered. I don't know how to tell him. It would shatter him. Slowly, I withdrew my hand and rose from my chair. I walked to the French doors and looked out at the ancient oak tree my great-grandfather had planted. It had withstood hurricanes and droughts, a silent witness to generations of Monroe women. I felt their strength seeping into me, a cool resolve hardening over the initial shock. I had spent my life as a peacemaker, smoothing over conflicts, absorbing the hurts of others to maintain harmony. But this was not a hurt to be absorbed. This was a violation. What will you do? Isabel asked from behind me. I turned back to her, and something must have changed in my expression, because her eyes widened slightly. The fragile, heartbroken woman was gone, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. Nothing, I said, the word clear and solid in the quiet room. Nothing? Helen, I don't understand. I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened. I will continue to be the devoted wife and the loving mother-in-law. I will smile, and I will let them think their plan is working perfectly. But why? Your marriage. Isabel, my dear, I said, sitting back down and pouring myself another cup of tea, my hand as steady as a surgeon's. Some wars are not won on the battlefield. They are won with patience and strategy. And I have been a very, very patient woman. I looked at her, my gaze direct. I need you to do the same. Can you continue to act as if you've told me nothing? She nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Yes. But what about Leo? What about your home? I took a sip of tea, the familiar warmth a balm to my fractured soul. Sometimes, to protect what is precious, you must let the wolves believe they have already won. They think they are playing a simple game of checkers. They have no idea I'm playing chess. After Isabel left, the untouched shortbread on the plate seemed to mock me. The house was no longer a sanctuary, it was a stage. Every photograph on the mantel, every piece of furniture imbued with memory, was now tainted. When Arthur came home that evening, humming a tune as he loosened his tie, I was in the kitchen preparing his favorite meal, coq au vin, a dish that took hours, a dish I made only on special occasions. Something smells incredible, he said, kissing my cheek with a casualness that now felt like an insult. Just felt like making something special, I said, my smile as carefully constructed as one of his buildings. I watched him that night, and in the days that followed, with new eyes. I saw the way his thumb constantly swiped across his phone screen, the secretive smiles he tried to hide. I noticed the expensive new watch on his wrist, a style too flashy for his usual conservative taste, a style Chloe would adore. 42 years, and I was only now seeing the stranger I had married. That night, lying in the king-sized bed we had shared for decades, his breathing deep and even beside me, I stared into the darkness and made a vow. They wanted to burn my world to the ground. Fine. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one who knew where all the water was buried. Living with the secret was like carrying a shard of glass in my heart. Every polite word, every shared meal, twisted it deeper. Yet, I moved through my days with a placid grace, playing the part of the oblivious wife. My garden became my true confidant. Tugging weeds from the soil felt like rooting out the lies in my life. Pruning the roses, cutting away the dead wood to allow for new growth, became a potent metaphor for what I knew I must do. 3 weeks after Isabel's visit, Chloe called. Her voice was like honey laced with saccharin. Helen, I was hoping we could have one of our lunch dates soon. Just us girls. There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about. We met at a small, sun-drenched cafe in the historic district, a place with climbing ivy and wrought iron tables. Chloe arrived looking like a magazine cover, dressed in a sleek, cream-colored dress that must have cost a fortune. She smelled of a heady, expensive perfume, the same one that now lingered on Arthur's suits. You look lovely, Helen, she said, air-kissing my cheek. And you, my dear, I replied, my smile serene. After we ordered, she leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hand covering mine in a gesture of faux intimacy. Helen, I'm worried about you. About you and Arthur. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The architect of my marriage's ruin, feigning concern. Oh? Why is that? Well, you just seem so distant from each other lately. I see it at family dinners. There's a tension. Her eyes, a crystalline blue, were wide with feigned sympathy. It happens. Marriages get stale. The spark fades. You deserve to be happy, Helen. Truly happy. I nodded thoughtfully, as if her words were a revelation. You may be right. Things have been difficult for a while now. A flicker of triumph sparked in her eyes, quickly masked by a look of compassion. Have you thought about what the future holds? For both of you? Life is too short to be in a situation that isn't fulfilling. Leo would want you both to be happy, even if that means being apart. You think we should get a divorce? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. I'm not saying that, she backpedaled a little too quickly. I'm just saying you deserve to be cherished. You're still a beautiful woman. Maybe it's time for a new chapter. Her every word was a calculated move, gently nudging the unsuspecting older woman toward the exit. I catalogued it all, filing it away in the cold, clear part of my mind that was now running this operation. That's very kind of you to say, Chloe. You've given me a lot to think about. That evening, I broached the subject with Arthur. He was in his study, surrounded by blueprints and models of his cold, angular buildings. Arthur, I said, standing in the doorway. I had lunch with Chloe today. He looked up, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. Oh? What about? She said some things that made me think. About us. About happiness. I let the words hang in the air. Maybe she's right. Maybe we've run our course. He stood up slowly, his expression a careful mask of solemnity, but I could see the relief flooding his features. He was being handed the one thing he wanted, without even having to ask for it. Helen, are you saying you want to end our marriage? I gave a small, weary shrug, as if my heart wasn't breaking. I'm saying I think we both deserve to be happy. And I don't think we're making each other happy anymore. If that's what you truly want, he said, his voice laced with false regret. He was a terrible actor. I just want what's best for you. Liar. But I smiled back, a sad, knowing smile he completely misinterpreted. I want us both to find peace, Arthur. The next day, I made an appointment. Not with our longtime family lawyer, but with a woman named Anya Sharma, a name I'd gotten from a friend. Her specialty was complex, high-asset divorces. Her office was in a discreet building on the other side of town, far from Arthur's world. Miss Sharma was a woman in her 40s with piercingly intelligent eyes and a calm, commanding presence. I sat across from her polished desk and, for the first time, told the entire story to a stranger. I left nothing out, the affair, Chloe's manipulations, my decision to play along. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, studying me. Mrs. Monroe, she said finally, her voice imbued with respect. You are a far more formidable woman than your husband gives you credit for. Now, let's talk about your assets. Specifically, let's talk about the Willows. I handed her the folder I'd brought from the safe in my study. It contained the deed to the house and the documents for the Hawthorne Trust, established by my great-grandmother in 1928. Miss Sharma's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose as she read. Well, well. Your great-grandmother was a visionary. What do you mean? She looked up from the age-yellowed pages, a slow smile spreading across her face. This trust is ironclad. It stipulates that the property and all assets derived from it, which, according to this, includes a significant portion of your investment portfolio funded by the sale of adjacent family land decades ago, can never be transferred to anyone outside the direct matrilineal bloodline. It can be inhabited by a spouse, but ownership never transfers. She tapped a long, elegant finger on a particular clause. And here's the masterstroke. It contains an infidelity clause. My breath caught in my throat. An infidelity clause? Quite progressive for its time, Miss Sharma said, clearly impressed. It states that in the event of a divorce sought due to spousal adultery, the offending party forfeits all rights, including residency, to any and all trust properties. They are to vacate the premises within 30 days of the divorce decree. Essentially, Helen, if you can prove he cheated, he leaves with nothing but his own personal earnings. The house, the land, the core of your investment portfolio, it all remains with you. Entirely. A sense of profound, vindicating relief washed over me. It felt as if my great-grandmother and all the Monroe women before me were standing in that room, their strength a shield around me. He has no idea, I whispered. He thinks we own it jointly. From what you've told me, he's operating under the assumption that he's about to walk away with half of everything, including your ancestral home, Miss Sharma confirmed. He thinks he holds all the cards. Then we shall let him continue to think that, I said, a newfound strength solidifying in my voice. We will let him show his entire hand before I reveal mine. I left Ms. Sharma's office feeling not like a victim, but like a general preparing for a final, decisive battle. Arthur and Chloe thought they were writing the end of my story. They had no idea I was merely letting them write themselves into a corner. The day of the meeting felt like the final act of a long, painful play. We met at the law offices of Peterson and Croft, Arthur's choice. The firm occupied the penthouse of one of his own buildings, a testament to his success, all sharp angles and cold marble. It was designed to intimidate. I walked in wearing a simple, elegant blue dress, my posture erect, my expression serene. Arthur was already there, pacing by the window, looking impatient. Leo sat on a leather sofa, his face a mask of misery. Beside him, Chloe was a picture of supportive concern, her hand resting on his arm, though her eyes kept darting toward Arthur. Richard Peterson, a man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, greeted us. He was an old golfing buddy of Arthur's, a fact I had uncovered during my research. We were led into a conference room with a view that stretched across the entire city. Peterson took his seat at the head of the vast mahogany table, a king in his court. Arthur sat at his right hand. I took the seat directly opposite them. Leo and Chloe sat further down, observers to the execution. As we've all agreed, Peterson began, his voice smooth as polished stone. The goal here is an amicable and equitable dissolution of the marriage. I inclined my head graciously. Of course. All I want is what's fair. Arthur shot me a surprised glance. He had expected tears, arguments, a scene. My calm compliance was unnerving him. I could see it in the slight tightening of his jaw. Peterson slid a thick, leather-bound folder across the table toward me. This is the proposed settlement agreement. We've tried to be generous, Helen, considering Arthur has been the sole high-income earner for the duration of the marriage. I opened the folder. The condescension in his tone was a minor irritation compared to the breathtaking arrogance of the words on the page. I was to receive the small garden apartment we owned downtown, half of a single joint savings account, and a modest alimony for 5 years. Arthur would retain the Willows, his company, the vacation home in the mountains, and the entirety of our extensive investment portfolio. This seems, I paused, pretending to search for the right word, unbalanced. Peterson adopted a patient, patronizing tone. Helen, we have to be realistic. The Willows has significant upkeep costs. The business requires Arthur's continued financial stability. This settlement ensures you have a comfortable, manageable life without the burdens of these large assets. Manageable, I repeated softly. The word was an insult, painting me as a frail, incompetent creature. Furthermore, Peterson added, pressing his advantage, there are some, shall we say, legal ambiguities concerning the original deed to the house. It's a very old property. To avoid any protracted legal battles, which could take years and deplete the estate, it's wisest for Arthur to retain the title. A complete and utter fabrication. A lie designed to steal my birthright. I could feel Chloe's energy at the other end of the table, a bright, humming eagerness. She was already choosing paint colors for my bedroom. I looked from Peterson's smug face to Arthur's, who was trying to look sympathetic. Helen, he's right, Arthur said gently. This is the cleanest way. You won't have to worry about a thing. The apartment is lovely, you've always said so. I looked at my son. Leo looked deeply uncomfortable, but was trusting his father to do the right thing. My heart ached for the disillusionment that was to come. I closed the folder with a soft, final thud. You seem to have thought of everything. We've tried to be thorough, Peterson said, leaning back in his chair, the victor. Then there's no reason to delay, I said, my voice clear and calm. I reached for the pen he offered. Where do I sign? The room fell silent. Even Chloe looked startled by my swift capitulation. Mom, are you sure? Leo asked, his voice laced with concern. Maybe you should have Ms. Sharma look at this. I turned to my son, the only truly innocent person in this room, and gave him a genuine, loving smile. Sweetheart, your father and I have made our decision. It's time to move on. Sometimes, holding on does more damage than letting go. I signed my name, Helen Hawthorne Monroe, on every line indicated. With each stroke of the pen, I felt not defeat, but a building sense of liberation. I was signing away a life that was already a lie, clearing the way for the truth. I pushed the signed document back across the table. There, I said, looking directly at Arthur. I hope you get everything you want. For a fleeting second, a shadow of guilt, or perhaps shame, crossed his face. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had just executed the perfect crime. Chloe was beaming. I'm so proud of you both for being so mature, she gushed, squeezing Leo's hand. This is what putting family first looks like. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Outside, in the stark sunlight, Leo hugged me tightly. Are you okay, Mom? Really? I will be, my love, I said, patting his cheek. Everything is going to work out exactly as it's meant to. As Arthur and Chloe walked toward their car, I heard her excited chatter. She was talking about helping me pack, about how she had some wonderful ideas for renovating the sunroom. I stood there, a lone figure on the pavement, watching my husband and my daughter-in-law drive away to celebrate their victory. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped me of my home, my security, my dignity. They had no idea they had just willingly walked into a trap I hadn't even had to set. The trap had been waiting for them for nearly a century, set in ink on yellowed paper by a woman whose strength ran in my very veins. The real settlement was yet to come. 2 weeks later, the facade of our family shattered completely. I was in my garden, my hands deep in the rich soil of the rose beds, when Leo's car skidded to a halt in the gravel driveway. He didn't get out for a long moment. When he finally did, he looked like a man who had aged a decade in a day. His face was ashen, his eyes holding the hollowed-out look of profound shock. Leo, I said, dropping my trowel and rushing to him. Sweetheart, what is it? He stumbled toward the porch steps and collapsed onto them, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent, racking sobs. She lied, he whispered, his voice broken. The whole time. All of it was a lie. I sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his back, and waited. Isabel called me, he finally managed, lifting his head. His eyes were red-rimmed and full of a pain that tore at my own heart. She told me I should look at Chloe's cloud account. At her old messages. He let out a bitter, strangled laugh. I didn't want to believe her. But I did it. And it was all there, Mom. Texts, emails, plans. Between her and Dad. Plans for the affair, the divorce, how to manage me, how to get the house. He looked at me, his gaze searching. She bragged about it to her friends. Called you the doting old relic and me the sentimental fool. She said Dad was her real prize and the Willows was the crown. The cruelty of it was still shocking, even though I knew the truth. Hearing it confirmed, hearing how they spoke of us, solidified the ice in my veins. I confronted her this morning, he continued, his voice gaining a hard edge I'd never heard before. She didn't even deny it. She just said I was naive to think she'd ever be content being a professor's wife. She said Dad understood her ambition. He shook his head in disbelief. I told her to pack a bag and get out. She laughed at me, said it didn't matter because in a few weeks she'd be moving into this house for good and I'd be the one looking for a place to live. The sheer malice of it. The gleeful destruction. I'm so sorry, Leo, I said softly. He looked at me then, a new question dawning in his eyes. You're not surprised. When I told you, you weren't surprised at all. It was time. He deserved the whole truth. He deserved to know he wasn't alone. No, sweetheart, I said, my voice steady. I wasn't. I've known for over a month. Over the next hour, sitting on the sun-warmed steps of the home they'd tried to steal, I told him everything. Isabel's visit. My meeting with Anya Sharma. The Hawthorne Trust. The infidelity clause. The deliberate, calculated performance at the lawyer's office. Leo listened in stunned silence, his initial grief slowly being replaced by a dawning comprehension, and then a quiet, simmering anger on my behalf. You let them do it, he whispered, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. You let them walk all over you, thinking they were winning. I let them reveal exactly who they are, I corrected gently. And in doing so, they handed me everything I needed to protect what our family built. To protect you. A car pulled into the driveway then. It was Isabel. She rushed toward us, her face etched with worry. Leo, I am so sorry. You saved me, Izzy, he said, his voice thick with emotion as he stood to face her. Don't you ever be sorry for telling me the truth. A profound, unspoken understanding passed between them, two people who valued honesty, both betrayed by the same person's lack of it. Later that day, another car arrived. This time it was a courier, delivering a package from Ms. Sharma's office. It contained the official, court-stamped divorce decree and a letter, drafted by Anya, to be delivered to Arthur Peterson. It formally notified them of the trust's provisions and gave them 30 days to vacate the property that was never theirs. The phone call came the next morning. It was Arthur. His voice was no longer smooth and confident, but a frantic, ragged mess. What have you done, Helen? He choked out. I was on the sun porch, sipping my morning coffee. I've done nothing, Arthur. I simply allowed you to do what you wanted. The trust. The house. Peterson said it's all yours. He said I have to leave. That is correct, I said calmly. That was the agreement my great-grandmother made to protect her family. It seems she was a very wise woman. But our life. 42 years. Yes, 42 years, I said, the coolness in my voice surprising even me. Which you decided were worth less than an affair with our son's wife. You made your choice, Arthur. You and Chloe. I believe the garden apartment downtown is still available. It's quite manageable, I hear. I hung up the phone before he could reply. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had heard in months. The final confrontation happened a week later. A moving truck pulled up to the Willows, followed by Arthur's sedan. Chloe stormed out, her beautiful face twisted into an ugly mask of fury. Arthur trailed behind her, looking like a defeated man. I watched from the living room window as Leo and Isabel, who had come to support us, met them on the lawn. You can't do this. Chloe shrieked at Leo. This is our house. No, Chloe. Leo's voice was firm, resonant with a newfound authority. It was never your house. It was never even my father's house. It belongs to my mother. And you are not welcome here. You conniving old witch, she screamed, her eyes finding me through the window. You think you've won. I opened the window just enough for my voice to carry across the lawn, clear and steady. Winning was never the point, Chloe. The point was truth. And the truth is, you are a greedy, cruel woman who has destroyed a family. Now, I suggest you and Arthur leave my property before I have you removed for trespassing. Her face paled. Defeated, she finally got back in the car. Arthur didn't even look at the house as they drove away. The moving truck, its cargo still unloaded, followed them down the long driveway, leaving nothing behind but the scent of exhaust and the sweet relief of peace. 6 months later, the grounds of the Willows were alive with the gentle murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. It was a warm day in late October, and the garden was awash in the golden light of autumn. Leo and Isabel were getting married, right there under the ancient oak tree. Watching my son, so handsome and happy, and Isabel, radiant in a simple lace dress, I felt a sense of profound rightness. They had found each other in the wreckage, their love built not on fantasy, but on a foundation of shared values and hard-won truth. Chloe was facing multiple fraud charges, and Arthur was living in the manageable downtown apartment, his reputation in tatters. I rarely thought of them. They were ghosts from another life. My life was full again, but in a new way. My relationship with Leo was deeper, built on a new level of mutual respect. Isabel was the daughter I'd always dreamed of. My garden was thriving. I had found my strength not in holding on, but in letting go of what was false to make room for what was real. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, I stood by my great-grandmother's rose bushes, their last blooms a defiant splash of color against the fading light. I was Helen Monroe of the Willows. I was a gardener, a mother, a friend. I was a survivor. And for the first time in a very long time, I was entirely, peacefully my own. The house had been protected. The family, the real family, had been restored. The roots held.